Okay, so good evening, everyone. You've made it to the virtual book launch of The Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennet. And we're here tonight actually with author Kathy Cowley. And I've got a copy of the book, but I blurred my background so you can't see it, but it's an awesome cover. So glad you could all join us for this very special event. My name is also Catherine. I'm Catherine Hass. I'm an adult services librarian at Portage District Library here in Portage, Michigan. I would just like to take a moment to welcome you all and introduce our very special guest. So, Katherine Cowley read Pride and Prejudice for the first time when she was 10 years old, which started a lifelong obsession with Jane Austen, and I can relate to that. She loves history, chocolate, traveling, and playing the piano, and she teaches writing classes at Western Michigan University. She lives in Portage, Michigan with her husband and three daughters, and The Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennet is her debut novel. So, Catherine, welcome. So glad that you could join us tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's a real treat. And as I understand it, we're actually going to start out with a little game to warm people up and get them into the spirit of the novel. Is that right?
Yes, so we're going to play a Who Said It game for Pride and Prejudice with the sisters. And I'll give a little bit of let me share my little PowerPoint for this. I'll tell you a little bit about each of the sisters. So if you haven't read Pride and Prejudice, you're not completely disadvantaged, or if it's been a while, then you will, not be, completely lost, hopefully. So my book obviously takes Mary Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. So we're going to figure out which Bennet sister said each of these lines from Jane Austen's novel, Pride and Prejudice. So we've got Jane Bennet. She's the oldest sister. She's classically beautiful. She's very hopeful and kind and very generous to people. She's incredibly loyal. She's quiet resolve in her trials, and she always sees the best in people. There's Elizabeth Bennet's the second sister. She's in the middle here. She's witty and clever. She's not not going to just get married for money or societal respect. She's quick thinking, willing to stand up to authority figures, an intelligent thinker, dad's favorite daughter. We've got Mary Bennet, and she's bookish. She's often overlooked by others. She's not always fared completely well in social situations and occasionally embarrasses herself or her family. She's always ready with a quote or an aphorism, and she's observative and inquisitive. Kitty Bennet is the fourth sister. She's silly and fun. She's a bit of a follower and likes to kind of take after her younger sister, Lydia. She loves dancing and admires a handsome officer and sometimes has an inconvenient cough. And then there's Lydia, is the youngest sister. She's silly and maybe the biggest flirt in Meryton. She does not care about societal ideals and expectations and sometimes buys things for the sake of buying them, even if she doesn't really like them. And her mother is rather partial to her. So, so there's our little recap of the sisters. So we're going to do this quiz. You kind of keep track for yourself. There is a little prize for whoever wins. So don't Google this. Don't pull open your copy of Pride and Prejudice with its many bookmarks in it. Just do this out of your head and kind of keep track of how many you get right. So let's see. So the first one. What are young men to rocks and mountains? So who said it? So I'll give you a moment to decide, and then you can either, make your decision or write it down, or however you're going to keep yourself honest. And then I'll tell you the answer, and you'll keep track.
I know I've got a guess in my head. We'll see if I'm right.
And this is quotes from the book, not the movie. Just sometimes it's tricky that way. So, what are young men to rocks and mountains? I'm going to give you 3 more seconds. Make your decision. Write it down or do something to kind of make your decision fixed. Okay, 2 seconds. Okay, the answer here is Elizabeth. Okay, number 2. Lord, how ashamed I should be of not being married
I know
before
this one. I know
three.
this one.
How ashamed I should be of not being married before 3 and 20.
I know this.
So I'll give you about 10, 15 seconds to make your decision. Five more seconds. Just make a decision. Okay, time's up. And the answer for this one is Lydia. That's why she gets married at 15, because spoilers, but it's a risk not being married at 23. Okay, number 3. Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. So who said it?
I know this one.
Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, your time's up. The answer for this one was Mary. Okay, number 4. There is a stubbornness about me that never can bear to be frightened at the will of others. My courage always rises at every attempt to intimidate me. So who said it? You got 5 more seconds. Okay, time's up. And the answer is Elizabeth. Okay, this next one. I should like balls infinitely better if they were carried on in a different manner. It would surely be much more rational if conversation instead of dancing were made the order of the day. So who said it? Five more seconds. Okay, so time's up. Your answer is fixed. The answer is actually none of the above. It was Caroline Bingley said it. However, in the 2005 film, they gave this line to Mary, and then Caroline Bingley made fun of Mary for saying it. But we're going by the book, so the answer should be none of the above. Okay, we're got 5 more. We're going to get through these, and then we'll get to the rest of the hopefully we'll have like a clear winner from these 10 questions. Okay, number 6. He is just what a young man ought to be, sensible, good-humored, lively, and I never saw such happy manners. Who said it?
I know this.
5 more seconds. Okay, your time is up. This one was Jane, the oldest sister. Okay, so the next one, number 7. In point of composition, the letter does not seem defective. The idea of the olive branch perhaps is not wholly new, yet I think it is well expressed. So who said it? 5 more seconds. Make a choice. Okay, your time is up. Number 7 was Mary. They never actually include that line in the movies. Number 8. I thought Colonel Forster looked very becoming the other night at Sir William's in his regimentals. So who said it?
Lydia?
Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, your time is up. The answer is none of the above. It was actually Mrs. Bennet, but it's the sort of thing that Lydia or Kitty would say, but it was actually their mother who was admiring the officers.
Lydia certainly comes by it naturally.
Yeah, she has an example here. Okay, number 9. I do not cough for my own amusement. 5 more seconds. Okay, time up. Number 9 was Kitty. And then number 10, you could not have made the offer of your hand in any possible way that would have tempted me to accept it. Five more seconds. Okay, time is up. That one was Elizabeth. So count up how many you got right if you've been keeping track. And did anyone get all 10 answers right? You can either tell us in the chat or turn on your mic. And anyone get 10 for 10? I did throw some tricky ones in there. Anyone get 9? Or 8? Oh, Annalisa.
Oh, we have a 9.
Do we have anyone else that got 9? Because I have I have like really tricky questions. Okay, so we've got Annalisa and Melissa got 9. Anyone else got 9? Okay, so we're gonna do now a runner-up question. This is just for Annalisa and Melissa. So we're gonna do a question and either they both get it right or one of them gets it wrong. If one of them gets it right and the other gets it wrong, then they win. So
and no pressure. Yeah.
No pressure. Okay. You guys are ready. Okay. So what do you keep winking at me for?
Kitty.
Oh, we had an answer from the audience. Okay, Annalisa and Melissa, do you guys want to tell us who you thought it was?
Yeah, it's Kitty.
Kitty, and was that Melissa that just said that?
Yeah,
Was that yours as well? Okay, so everyone else be really quiet on this one. We're going to trick them, right? One of them has to get this wrong. Okay, the next one, oh, that's also labeled number 11, even though that's not true. Dining out, that is very unlucky. So only Annalisa and Melissa, everyone else keep it to yourself. See if they can do this. Okay, you guys can guess, so you can either type it in or say it out. Annalisa and Melissa. Okay, so yes, Melissa and Annalisa are both correct. It's none of the above. It was Mrs. Bennet. So you're both correct on that. Oh my goodness, this is intense. I don't think my last one's going to be good enough. Okay. Okay, last one. I'm like on the edge of my seat here. Okay, do not be afraid of my running into any excess. Who said it? So I'll give you guys like 5 seconds and then I'll have you type it in, but don't press enter until I say, okay? Okay, so type it in, Annalisa and Melissa. Don't press enter yet. Give you a moment. Do not be afraid of my running into any excess. Okay, are you guys ready? Press enter. We'll see who wins this. Okay, so Annalisa said Jane and Melissa said Elizabeth, and it was actually Elizabeth. So that's another tricky one. It was a conversation between Jane and Elizabeth, but it was Elizabeth that said it. So Melissa is the winner. So you'll need to get in touch with Catherine, the librarian, because she has a $10 gift card to the local bookstore here, but they also ship, that she'll be giving out. So
yeah. So Melissa, congratulations. That was some good quote work. I'm putting my email in the chats and you can email me your address and I will mail you a $10 gift card to our local bookstore.
Thank you everyone for indulging me in playing a who said it, Game with the Sisters.
I think it really brought us back to the novel and the characters, and a lot of these characters do show up in your book as well.
Yeah, I think Lydia is the only one that's not there, but she has a letter in the first chapter. So
That's true. If you are still waiting on the book, the Lydia letter at the very beginning is quite fun. I think you're going to enjoy it. So we're going to just kind of transition into a little bit more of a traditional author talk sort of thing, a bit of a Q&A between Katherine and Katherine. So Katherine, tell us a little bit about you. How did you end up in Portage? When did you discover your passion for writing?
okay, so we moved to Portage, Michigan about close to 5 years ago. My husband started working here, and so we moved. We only visited Michigan a couple times before that, so it was quite exciting. We really love it here. And my passion for writing has been around for a long time. I first discovered it when I was 5 years old, and we watched a video in my kindergarten class, and it was about Icarus getting too close to the sun and dying. And I was 5, and I was upset because he was doing something amazing. He was flying. So then a few months later, I had my mom help me, and I wrote my first story that I can remember. I'd written some little things before, but my first like full story. It was called The Turtle that got too close to the sun. So a turtle hops on a pink balloon, and the pink balloon goes up, and he gets too close to the sun, and the balloon pops. But the turtle lands in the water, and turtles can swim, so he was fine. And he turned yellow, and he felt different. And that's how the story ended. And then turtle felt different. And I realized I can change things with my words. And so I've always loved words. I've always loved stories. I wrote stories through elementary school and middle school and high school. And then in college, I didn't write as many stories, but I did do writing. And then after I was finished with college, I said, I'm actually going to do this. So I've been working really hard at writing for the last, about 10 years. So, yeah.
That is such a fun story. I love that you use your writing to recreate the scenario into something happy. So you probably know this, but enthusiastic admirers of Jane Austen's writing are commonly called Janeites. Would you consider yourself a Janeite? And who introduced you to Jane Austen?
So my mom gave me a copy of Pride and Prejudice when I was 10 years old, and I read it. And then I had a reading log, and I can see that I read it twice when I was 10. So I must have liked it. I don't remember reading it at the age of 10, but I wrote it down. And so I mean, to me, Jane Eyre is anyone that that loves Jane Austen. So whether you love one of her novels, or whether you love one of the movies, or whether you love all of them and read, recreate her, the clothing and go to conventions and reread her novels every year. I do think we have someone in the audience that's wearing a Jane Austen dress, which I love. That's very exciting to me. That's like aspirations for me. One day I will have a Regency dress and bonnet. So one day I will be you, and have that, because I want that. But I feel like anyone can be a Janeite if you've been touched by her work and love it and care about it in some way. So I feel like it's a in general, very welcoming, open community. And you have people that can quote every line, and you have people that really love one of the movies. And either way, like, you love Jane. That's great.
It's certainly a lovely community, both online and in person. And if you want additional Jane Austen reading recommendations and you live in Portage, feel free to stop by the library. I'll hook you up. So what was your inspiration for this book? It centers around Mary Bennet. Did you have any trouble embodying the character?
So I actually originally had the idea for the story in 2013. I was on my cyclical Jane Austen kick, where I was watching Austen Land and trying to push that movie on everyone I knew. And I rewatching, different versions of Pride and Prejudice. And I was watching the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, and I actually noticed Mary. I'm like, poor Mary. Like, oh, that's kind of, like, what is she going to do with her life if she ends up doing what everyone expects her to do? She's going to be a spinster living with one of her sisters, and they'll laugh at her occasionally. And I thought, but she's such a cool character. She has so much going for her at the same time, even though she can kind of sometimes be awkward or not always fit in with what everyone else is doing and thinking. And so I was just like, I bet she has a secret life. And then the title came to me, The Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennet. And I was like, that's cool. Well, now I have to figure out what her secret life is. And so I thought about it for a few months and I'm like, she's a spy. And I got really excited, and then I read a book on the history of the time period, and I was still excited, and then I looked it up, and there was a nonfiction book on Regency spies, but it wasn't coming out for another 2 years. And I was like, okay, I'm working on another project. Maybe I'll come back to this someday. And so then it kind of just sat in my head for 4 years until I decided to work on this in 2017. And so just for years, I would just occasionally think about Mary and think about her traits and think about how she would act in certain situations and what she would do and what she would want. And so by the time I actually started writing it in 2017, I had been thinking about her for years and, kind of been in that mind frame and reread Pride and Prejudice and rewatched a bunch of stuff and so it was she wasn't one, because I'd spent all that time in the prep work, kind of the thinking work. There were plenty of hard parts of the writing, but getting into her head wasn't, because I'd already done that work. So.
That's so spectacular. I think it's kind of rare sometimes for the title to come first for a work. But this book definitely lives up to the title. So if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, you're in for a treat. So what was the most difficult challenge of writing a novel? I mean, this is a 328-page book. It's your first debut novel. What were some of the challenges you encountered along the way?
I mean, it's always hard to write a book. So this is actually the fourth book I've finished. This is my first published book. So it's always hard to finish. It's always hard to push through. You always have that point in the middle where you're like, do I actually want to finish this project? And so for me, a lot of it is just kind of, keeping myself on track, keeping the end in mind, and, keeping writing and kind of reminding myself why I love the story or why I love the idea. In terms of like the story itself, one of the hardest sections to write was the chapters that are the ball scenes. And balls, I mean, are kind of just always these amazing parts of Jane Austen's novels. So you really want to do a good ball scene. And balls are difficult because you have so many characters. You have, most of the time, almost all the key characters are there at the ball. And then you have so many mini interactions and big interactions. And in this story, and it's often a pivotal moment for the characters where there's change or transformation. And often they'll have triumphs, or they'll have failures, or they'll have both. And so it took a lot of work to figure out the ball scenes and the sequence of it and fitting all these things together. But it's one of my very favorite parts of the book. And it ends up being really crucial for the mystery and for her character and for her relationships. So.
Yeah, and ball scenes I think are so fun to watch, especially in like movies and everything too. So they end up being such pivotal parts of the story, but it's like you have all your pieces on the chessboard and they're all moving simultaneously. It's incredible. So do you believe in writer's block? What advice would you give those who may be here curious about a local author publishing something but never get past a few lines or a few pages?
I mean, I definitely believe in writer's block. I've been stuck in my writing, but there can be all sorts of reasons for it. I mean, you can have outside life stuff. I mean, you have Jane Austen herself had times in her life where she wasn't able to put much time towards writing because she had this point in her life where she kept on having to move and they didn't have a stable home and other things. And so sometimes you do have life things going on that can actually be the real cause of writer's block. Or you might have depression or anxiety or other mental health struggles. And sometimes that can be a writer's block. Sometimes writer's block can just be because this is a huge, giant thing that you're going to do. And so for me, one of the most useful things was just finishing a whole novel and knowing, oh, I've done this whole thing. I can do this, and it is very hard to do. It is no small task, but I can do that. So that was very useful to me. Other times writer's block is because I'm going in the wrong direction or something's broken and not working. And so that sometimes I'll just skip ahead to the next chapter and say, I can worry about fixing all this and making this work. It's not working. I'll worry about this next draft. Or sometimes I'll start writing a different chapter, or sometimes I'll really start like sketching it out and drawing out like the pieces and figure out, okay, this isn't working because I'm leading this up and I'm putting the characters in a corner or taking the characters where they wouldn't naturally go. And so then I'll step back a little bit. So sometimes it's just a story problem, which sometimes I just jump ahead, or sometimes I figure out what the story problem is and then solve it, and then often that opens things up. So I do feel like writer's block is a thing, but it's figuring out what is causing this. Is it because I've never done a whole novel before? Well, then you just write and you let yourself. Sometimes I'll write comments on the sides like, this paragraph doesn't work. Jane Austen's characters would never have said this, and I'll just write myself comments to allow myself to push forward and let go and say, I know I can fix this in the second draft, and if I get hung up on this, I'll never get to the second draft. I'll just be stuck here on this forever.
Those are some excellent tips for anyone who's ever tried writing. I can definitely see a few of those getting you past an instance of writer's block. So do you have a overall favorite character or favorite novel of Jane Austen's work? She's got I believe, 6 novels and some other novellas and things. Is it Mary Bennet, or is your heart kind of with a different book or character?
I feel like it changes depending on the year and the season. I mean, growing up, I always loved Elizabeth Bennet. And then I started realizing I'm actually more like Mary Bennet in some ways and kind of connecting with her. So I, definitely love both of those. Last year, my favorite was probably Emma. It just really, reading and having experience with Emma last year. But I love Anne Elliot and Persuasion. I mean, I just love, so it switches. It depends on the day. So.
That's fantastic. And I think a lot of us can relate. Feel free to throw your favorite character into the chat. I'm sure you'll find other people here who also enjoy that book or character. So we've made it to another little break in the program, and we're going to do another game, kind of get ourselves thinking and moving before we dive into this fantastic novel. And here's Katherine read some of it. So this game is going to be Regency True or False. So I am going to go ahead and share that. It'll be another one where we'll kind of look at it on the screen and you'll keep track of your answers, and then there will be a winner at the end. So keep track of your score. So let me pull that up. Okay.
Oh, we good at this.
All right. Is everybody seeing Regency era, true or false?
Yep.
Fantastic. Let's test your wits on some facts from the past. So question 1, now you've got to keep track if you think this would be true or false. It could ruin a young woman's reputation if someone saw her ankle. So I'll give that about 5 more seconds. You've just got to guess true or false. And for the Regency era, that would actually be false.
Yes.
In the Regency era, it wasn't super scandalous for ladies to show their ankles. That kind of came later in the Victorian period. But they had to get out of mud puddles, and there were lots of dances. So if an ankle popped up, it wasn't that big of a deal. But it was, however, scandalous to say legs. All right, question 2. A gentleman never asked a lady for 3 dances unless they were engaged. So you've just got to guess true or false there. We'll give it a few more seconds. And that is true. So a dance at a ball included two dances together, not just one. So when a gentleman asked a lady to stand up with him, they were actually committed to each other for about 20 to 30 minutes. So if you dance with somebody twice, that's a big chunk of time, and three times would be practically a good portion of the ball. So you didn't really do that unless you were engaged. All right, next question. So true or false? It was not uncommon for a night at the theater to involve three performances. We'll give that a few more seconds. Okay, and the answer is true. The theater during the Regency era lasted most of the night, actually. There was a main production that was the play, but after the main event, there were sometimes light after pieces that could go on into the wee hours in the morning. And some people just stuck around to enjoy the people watching as well. All right, next true or false question. Waterloo teeth were dentures made of deceased soldiers' teeth and quite valuable. Just guess true or false there.
Oh, true.
And that one is true. And a morbid yet fortunate turn of events for the people who had poor dental care in the era, the 47,000 soldiers who died at Waterloo, where they actually went around and grabbed their teeth because dentures made with human teeth were a lot better than wood or animal teeth.
So I didn't know this, and so this is going to go in book 3 of Mary Bennet because it's actually includes the Battle of Waterloo. So I'm pretty sure this fact is going to find a way into book 3.
You got a sneak peek at book 3 there. Question 5. Cyanide was considered a cure-all solution that women and men used to improve their appearance. True or false there? About cyanide.
Really?
Give it a couple more seconds here. All right, that one's actually false. The cure-all solution was actually arsenic. So a little bit of a trick question there. But paper, cloth, candles, all contained arsenic. It was a common beauty sort of cure-all. Men tried to use it to increase stamina, treat baldness. And the Regency era, because it was all over the place, actually kind of became known as the arsenic era as well. All right, next question. Pig's tongues were considered a delicacy and sometimes served stuffed in chicken at dances. True or false there? Would you eat pig tongue stuffed in chicken at a dance? All right, here's the answer. That is true. So pork was a staple for the middle and upper classes. Little went to waste. It went into sweetmeats and things, but one tasty finger food was chicken stuffed with pig's tongues. And it was a favorite at dances because it was kind of something that you didn't need to sit down and eat. It was a finger food.
Pigs in blankets.
It is kind of like that. All right, next question. So plain sewing or mending clothes was considered improper in front of company. True or false? We'll give that a few more seconds. That was true. Okay, so plain sewing, like fixing dresses, was not proper because you're mending your own clothes. But fancy work like embroidery or knitting, however, was done in all kinds of society, and some men even had embroidery and other things as hobbies. All right, next question. After the family members of the house enjoyed a pot of tea, the housekeeper was often allowed to dry out the leaves and rebrew them later. True or false?
Oh, true.
We'll give that a couple more seconds. Okay, so the answer here is true. Tea was a really expensive import and kind of a staple of life. So the common scenario was the family brewed a pot, and then the housekeeper dried it out and brewed a pot, and then she might even dry it out and brew that for someone else. So it kind of worked its way down the societal chain there. Next question. Ice cream was a popular Regency treat, and a favorite flavor was Parmesan cheese. True or false? And you see the Bennets dining on Parmesan cheese ice cream. Couple more seconds here. Okay. So that is actually true. Ice cream was a favorite Regency confection, and one of the more popular fashionable flavors was Parmesan cheese. It was part of a famous ice cream and other confections cookbook called The Complete Confectioner by Frederick Nutt that came out first in 1789 and was later republished in 1807. It also included a recipe for burnt ice cream, in which the cream was scalded until it turned brown and then imparted a burnt flavor to ice cream. So if you've ever had a craving for burnt ice cream, you were obviously born in the wrong time, and you should just time travel back to the Regency era. Okay, next question. And we're almost done. The length of a ball was determined by the candle selected by the host. True or false? Couple more seconds. Okay, and that one is actually true. It cost about 15 pounds, or an average man's yearly wage, to light a ballroom with wax candles for one night. So candles were sold in 4-hour or 6-hour burn lengths, and you set it up as the guests were getting there. So you can imagine walking into the ballroom and finding it ablaze with 6-hour candles, or the disappointment of only finding the 4-hour kind. All right, final true or false questions. Murder scenes were avoided for fear the death waited there to claim another victim. True or false? Okay, a couple more seconds. And the answer is false. So murder scenes were actually considered entertainment. The public was allowed to visit a murder scene, file past the deceased. In some high-profile cases, thousands of people viewed the victim, trampling over any crime scene evidence. And eventually, the victim would be taken to a pub or someplace to keep the body cool until the coroner arrived. So how did we do? There were 11 questions. So did anybody get 11 of 11 right?
I did.
You did. That's fantastic. Yep. Anybody else get 11? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute your microphone. All right. I think 11 is the victory. So I'm going to put my email in the chat, and just email me your address and I will send your bookstore gift card to you. Thanks. So that you can go to the bookstore on us. Yay. So thanks everybody for playing. Hopefully you learned something about the Regency era. I know I learned a couple of things while researching that. Okay, well, now that we've kind of warmed up our brains, I think we're ready to hear a little bit from this fantastic book, The Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennet by Katherine Cowley. Katherine, would you indulge us?
Yes, I'm just going to, let me me fix my camera. Hopefully I'm blurry now. Let me just turn off my video for just a second. Turn it back on, and it should get me back in focus. There. Okay. Good. So, Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennet. I'm just going to read from the beginning for a few minutes. So, chapter 1. There's a quote at the beginning of the chapter from the Times, London, August 3rd, 1813. Bonaparte is still flying from region to region, reviewing his troops, fortifying his positions, improving his garrisons, collecting provisions, and in short, doing everything that can give him a permanent hold upon Germany. Miss Mary Bennet could do nothing to stop her life from shattering to pieces, so she played the pianoforte. Her cousin, Mr. Collins, had arrived to take possession of Longbourn before her father, Mr. Bennet, was even in the grave. As Mr. Collins and the men he had hired swept through the house, removing items he had sold, Mary attempted to drown out the commotion by playing faster and faster, louder and louder, until her younger sister, Kitty, exclaimed, "Can you please stop, Mary?" Mary pulled her fingers off the keys and sniffed. Their eldest sister, Jane, known as Mrs. Bingley since her marriage not quite a year before, cleared her throat. "What I think Kitty means to say is it might be more appropriate to play that funeral march with a little more solemnity." Mary tried not to take offense. It was she, of all her sisters, who had applied herself most to the pianoforte over the years. Should she not be able to choose the manner in which she played? A sticky summer scent blew in through the open window, and the breeze disturbed Mary's music. She carefully rearranged the pages. Kitty, Jane, and Elizabeth were seated at a nearby table, assisting with the funeral preparations. They answered letters of condolence and sorted the black gloves for the funeral guests. In a few minutes they would organize the mourning rings. Mary had assisted them for a while, but she was more inclined to pass the time on the pianoforte. However, if they would not appreciate her playing... "Oh, here's a letter from Lydia," said Elizabeth. Lydia was their youngest sister and had been the first to marry to a Mr. Wickham. Elizabeth's husband, Mr. Darcy, had purchased him a new commission, and his regiment was currently training so that they could travel to the continent and fight against Napoleon Bonaparte. Mary did not leave the pianoforte, but she did lean forward to better hear the contents of the letter. "Dearest mother and sisters, I am devastated by the death of father, and I have not stopped shedding tears since I heard the news. While I would love to return to Longbourn, my dear Wickham must remain here, and I find myself unable to part from him for even a few days. Surely you understand what it is to be newly married and in love. I have used the money that you sent to purchase clothes of mourning. Have you seen the advertisements? In London, some women are wearing burgundy for mourning instead of black. I went to the dressmaker and chose out a fine fabric. I intend to be the envy of all the mourners. I will be thinking of each of you with fondness. Know that you and father are in my heart. With love and tears, Lydia." The four sisters sat in shocked silence. After a moment of reflection, Mary felt prepared to speak. A duty to one's spouse is paramount, but in this case, a duty to one's parents should take precedence. To spend the money meant for traveling costs on expensive mourning clothes instead, that speaks of focusing on matters of little worth. Hannah More wrote, "A life devoted to trifles not only takes away the inclination, but the capacity for higher pursuits." "Thank you, Mary," said Jane. "How could she write such a letter at a time like this, with such disregard for our father?" said Elizabeth. Elizabeth was often the most rational of Mary's sisters, which was an admirable trait, and she generally managed to express her sentiments in a concise yet compelling manner, a skill which Mary wished she could imitate. "Even if I were married to a man like Wickham," said Kitty, "I would come for a funeral." Jane reached across the table and took the letter. She would probably say something altogether too kind and more forgiving than Lydia deserved. "Oh, surely she is prevented for some reason from coming and is using this excuse as a mask for her emotions. See this line, 'I have not stopped shedding tears since I heard the news.' Do you not hear the real sadness there?" Mary did not sense any sadness on Lydia's part. Of course, she had never understood her youngest sister. She tried to withhold judgment, for various sermons said it was not man's role to judge, yet she often found herself condemning Lydia's follies. Jane and Elizabeth had come when their father had taken ill. All his daughters had been there with him in the moment he took his last breath. All except Lydia. And now she chose not to attend his funeral. A man entered the room without the courtesy of a knock or warning, and they silenced and turned back to their work. It was best not to discuss overly personal matters in front of servants, and this seemed especially true for the men hired by Mr. Collins. So I'm going to stop there, but in just a moment, the mourning rings, they had rings that they used for mourning in the Regency period to commemorate those who had died, and they go missing. And Mary finds them, and this kind of sets her off on this much larger mystery.
Well, thank you so much for reading us the first excerpt from your book. Hopefully everyone got a chance to catch the flavor of the novel and some of the excitement and twists and turns coming. I know I really loved that first passage when I read the first part of the book, and I can't wait to finish the end of it. But we have now made it to our audience Q&A. So for those of you that are fans of author Katherine Cowley, or just Janeites looking to learn more about the secret life of Miss Mary Bennet, this is your chance to ask questions. So put them in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked, or feel free to, in an orderly fashion, unmute yourselves and give a little wave and say hi and ask your question.
If you have read the whole book, there are many people who have not. So try not to do questions that have, if you have a question that has major, big spoilers, just email it to me.
Yes, that's true. You can find, of course, Katherine at her website, katherinecowley.com. Send her an email there if you have a question that's going to involve a lot of spoilers. But this book just came out last Thursday, so let's try to preserve the fun of the story for those who are just getting into it. So let's see. There was a question that came in earlier, and Katherine, you were able to answer it in the chat. Don't the mourning rings have hair in them? And you mentioned that they do. Do you want to explain a little bit about the mourning rings?
Yeah, well, so some mourning rings, there were actually all sorts. And if you were very close to the person that died, you would typically receive a larger and nicer mourning ring. And so, so it's going to be fancier. And so the ring Mary receives, and you read more about it in chapter 2, does have a lock of her father's hair. It actually has a bezel so she can switch which side is facing out. So they're all, a huge variety of mourning rings. If you didn't know the person very well, weren't very close to them, you might just get a small ring. And so people would end up with these collections of mourning rings, and they'd kind of sometimes have boxes of mourning rings, which were sometimes even called mourning ring graveyards, because you could not possibly wear all the mourning rings you had received for people that you knew who had died. Okay, someone asked, are the blurbs at the beginning of each chapter, are these fact or fiction? And it's an interesting way to track the passage of time. So all but 3 of the newspaper headings at the start of chapters are actual excerpts from newspapers. So I read hundreds of newspapers from 1813 to find these particular quotes that I felt like would thematically connect to the chapter. So there are 3 that were completely made up by me, and I tried to make them match the others. But yeah, it's really was very fascinating to get into the actual newspapers from the time period and see how they were talking about things and what they were talking about.
So I think Melissa put some fighting words in the chat here. She wants to know, for the film versions of Pride and Prejudice, 1995 or 2005?
Okay, that is fighting words. You do risk offending people. I love both of them. I have watched both of them a lot. As a film, I like the 2005 better because it's very cinematic, and it is, very beautiful cinematography and editing and, music. So filmically, I like the 2005 better, but I absolutely love the 1995 as well. So hopefully that's a safe response, but it's also true. And I have watched some of the older versions of Pride and Prejudice. I haven't managed to get through the 1980. I know a lot of people love that one. I think that the 40 or so? Well, I love that one, even though it's a very different take as well.
That one is a different take. If you haven't watched it yet, track it down at your local library or something, because it'll put a whole new spin on it. So Sarah would like to know, did you get to go to England for research?
So I actually did go to England a couple of years ago. It was after I'd already written and mostly revised the first book, and I went to London. So my England trip really helped me with book two, which is set in London. But I did, end up, I went to the Museum of London, which has really cool historic exhibits on like the Regency and Victorian time periods. And based on that, I did actually change a few like minor details in this book in the, kind of later edits on the book based off of that trip.
That's fantastic. And I think we have a couple more attendees who are decked out in Regency garb. So if you're give a wave there. Hello, you both look lovely. All right. Next question here is from Elaine. How do you reconcile another era's biases, like how when how things are sometimes viewed with modern audiences?
I mean, at a certain point, you're always writing for your own time, no matter what you do. And so I think sometimes, it's the balance of, you choose which characters to portray and which characters to foreground their opinions. And I think it's useful to have, in any time period, there were characters with different viewpoints and things. And so I think that's a way that allows you to kind of, they're very modern thinkers that could be, quotes in the newspapers at the time that could have come from today. Or you read Mary Wollstonecraft at the time, and she's still a very, kind of progressive thinker, like still has a lot of insights on, for example, women's rights or other things. And so I think it's just partly by choosing which characters to foreground and choosing who your main character is can be a good way to show it, and just by allowing even a diversity of perspectives within your characters.
And I think sometimes including some of those details where you have women excluded from things, like there's a very poignant conversation at the beginning of the book where Elizabeth and Jane and the other sisters are trying to decide, do we even go to our father's funeral, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it just wasn't common for women at the time period. So we have another question in the chat. Was Mr. Booth a real person?
No, Mr. Booth is not, but he's inspired by some of the people I read about in the book Regency Spies. I can't remember who the author is, but it's called Regency Spies. It's by a female historian. And it's a really fascinating look at the actual spies in this time period.
Other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or give a little wave and I can call on you. So I know when I sit down to read a book, like your lovely book, I typically brew like a big cup of coffee and I put on a fuzzy blanket and I hope my cat wanders by and like looks at me. Do you have any like reading rituals or writing rituals that you'd care to share with everyone?
For reading, I'll do it anywhere. I'll just grab a book and sit on my sofa or sit on the bed or sit outside and really, but for writing, I'll often, if I'm writing in the afternoon, I'll take a 5-minute power nap. And then I will set up my computer and I'll just sit and just kind of really turn on my timer and I'll just start writing, and it just kind of gets me in the mode like, okay, now I have to write. So, and I've just kind of trained myself to, okay, now I just have to do it. Let's sit down and work for an hour without stopping, and then I can take a break and then do another. Okay, so we had, someone was raising their hand. It looks like you guys also ended up typing into the chat. Do you want to just tell us your question?
Will there be a love interest in the next book for Mary?
So I commit that either in books 2 or 3 there will be. So I won't nail it down more than that. But yes, there will.
I love Mary.
So someone else in the chat said, when will the next book be released? So book 2 is basically done. It only has proofreads left, which means a proofreader is going through it and checking to make sure there aren't commas or like last words misspelled or things, and proofreaders still sometimes miss things, but they're very, very good. And so, yeah, right now a proofreader is going through book 2 and they're making the cover for book 2. So book 2 will come out next March. And then book 3.
Wait, that's a long time.
I know, it's a long time. Publishing takes a while, unfortunately. But book 3, I'm halfway done writing the first draft. I hit the halfway point today. So that's also set to come out next year, I think in September of 2022. But that could change within a little bit, but it should be fall of 2022 for book 3.
That's exciting. Yeah, the publishing industry does flex and flow a little bit depending on what's going on, but I'm definitely excited to read more Mary adventures coming up. There was another question just talking about some of the harder parts of the book to write. I think I speak for everyone when I say that you embody the time period and the language and everything so well. It seems effortless. So what were some of the challenges?
Part of it was just getting the big mystery. So one thing that may surprise you is there was no dead body in draft 4 or draft 5. So there was plenty of mystery and there were some loose ends. And so I was submitting to agents and I thought the book was really done. And the person that ended up becoming my agent, Stephanie Evans, who's incredible, she's like, okay, you've got a lot here, but there's just, and I love your writing and I love your characters. So I want to be your agent. I want to sell this book. She's like, but you're missing the big mystery. And then here are your loose ends. So what could you use to tie this together? And why is this happening? And who is this character really? And I thought about it and I was like, oh, that is something I want to address. And I thought about it for a few days and I realized this would tie everything together. And so her insights actually really massively changed the book. And I did a complete revision. So that was a really big revision, right as I signed with my agent. And then I sent it to one of my writer friends and a former college roommate, Rachel, who I think I saw here tonight. And I told her that I had added a completely new subplot, but I didn't tell her which one. And she thought it was a different one. So I'm like, yes, I managed to tie it all together. But that was an intense revision month. But it actually, I just saw the book go from it's working and it's good, but it just took it up multiple levels. But it was, definitely a challenging revision, even though it was a lot of fun. And Rachel's saying in the chat, I had no idea. And then someone said the book, Regency Spies, Secret Histories of Britain's Rebels and Revolutionaries by Sue Wilkes. Yes, that is the book that I read. That's really interesting about the spies.
Okay. Other questions?
Will you be writing any other books in any other time periods? Maybe with.
So I'm not sure yet what I will be doing. Probably I have a 3-book deal. So it's written as a trilogy, but a lot of mystery novel, series extend past that. So depending on if there's more story to tell, I could extend past it, but it will be satisfying and kind of feel complete as a trilogy. So I'll either end that at a trilogy, Mary Bennet at a trilogy, or I might decide to keep writing if I find other stories that I want her to tell or to tell about Mary. I do have a kind of a steampunk novel that I'm revising right now. So it's set kind of an alternate world, 1890s, and I'm revising that right now, kind of, but with the history of electricity. So that's fun. And then I have an idea for a early silent film history mystery, which would be fun to write, but I don't know if I'll write it. So I have lots of ideas and we'll see. I'm definitely revising the steampunk right now and we'll see.
Looking forward to that.
What I write next.
That's going to be amazing. Thank you.
Okay, someone said, did COVID-19 affect you in regards to writing or any part of the process? If so, how? Yes. Yes, it did. I have a blog on my website and I think it's called, a blog post called, I think it's called The Mary Bennet Draft from COVID-19. And so book 2 I accidentally wrote the first draft of while I was writing book one, which was it's very nice to accidentally write a first draft of another book. That's a really great um, accident to do, but it needed a lot of work, and it was really kind of fragmented. It was great 45,000 word kind of exploratory draft, not truly a full draft. Um, and so I needed to write draft two, and I needed it to be a full book instead of kind of these parts. And so draft two was the hardest draft I've ever written in my life of anything. And it is completely because of COVID-19 and just life and teaching from home and my kids being home and everything being combined and a lot of stress. And it was a kind of a challenging plot to pull together as well. And so it really was challenging to get that draft done. And just to keep pushing myself through it and getting stuck and getting that writer's block and being like, no, this time it's life. This time it's life that's causing this. But I need to keep working on this. And so, but I got through it. So, someone says, can you give us the title for number two? Book two is called The True Confessions of a London Spy. And I really love book two. So she's in London and she's staying with Elizabeth, and Kitty is staying with them too. It's Mary's first London season, and there's a murder in the first chapter.
Of course.
Actually, it's before the first chapter. But...
Oh,
that sounds so exciting. All right. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Other questions for our author?
I do have one other thing I wanted to say is I have some goodies I'd love to mail out. So some people have already, like, if you're following me on social media, you may have already signed up for this. I have, this is a bigger version, but I have these book plates that I got made of a quote from the book. This is a big version, but I have little cards and I have little stickers that are book plates, so you can actually peel them off and put them in a book. Or if you're reading a library copy, like the Portage Library has copies of the book, or you're listening to the audiobook or whatever, and you just want a card, you can fill out the form. And I also have some stickers that I'll be mailing out too. So if you already saw this on my social media a couple weeks ago and you signed up, you will be getting the stickers too, in addition to either the book plate or the card. But if you haven't signed up or haven't heard about this and want to, I'm planning to mail all of these out by the end of the week. So let me just put it into the chat. So I just need you to fill out this Google form, and I'll mail you like either, a smaller version of this card or a book plate to stick in your book and a couple fun stickers to go with it as well.
That's exciting. And I know some people, even though this is virtual, we're hoping for like an autograph from you for their book. So do you sign the book plates as well?
Yeah, so I will sign it. And then if you want to, I'll personalize it. So some people prefer their books. Yeah, so it fits perfectly exactly where you guys are pointing on the book. The sticker fits right there. But yeah, so I will sign it. And then if you want, I'll personalize it. So you'll just write in the form, do I want it personalized or not? And write how you want me to write your name. And then I'll write a sentence or two also with it of my choice. So
well, that is absolutely lovely, and those are some of the most fun Regency literary book plates I've ever seen, and I've seen a few. So definitely click on that form and fill that out if you're looking for some swag about the secret life of Miss Mary Bennet to put in your book. And I'm just looking to make sure we didn't miss any questions. Now's your chance if you want to ask Katherine Cowley anything about Mary Bennet and this lovely mystery. I think we've made it through them all. So that just leaves some gratitude. Thank you so much for coming here and doing this book launch with us. So glad that you were able to join us. And thank you, everyone, for coming and listening to Katherine Cowley, playing some games with us. It was a real treat to just kind of jump into the Regency area with this book, The Secret Life of Miss Mary Bennet. So Portage Library has some copies. They're also available at your local bookstores. Katherine Cowley's website is in the chat as well, so you can go there and get some links to find your own copy.
Yes, thank you, everyone. It was so good to see everyone here. People I know, people I'm excited to meet. I'm so glad that you came. Really, thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting me and my story.
Yeah, it's a lot of congratulatory and thank you messages in the chat. So just once again, thank you for sharing your gift of writing that started so early and has blossomed into something that will please Janeites and just fun novel readers alike. So thank you, and thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic evening. Hope to see you at a future literary event at the library or at one of Katherine Cowley's events. So have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.